May 10, 1940. At exactly 5:30 a.m., the fragile peace of Western Europe vanished into a terrifying mechanized roar. Across the borders of Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, the German Wehrmacht unleashed a sudden, immense military avalanche. Hundreds of panzers rumbled forward, while thousands of elite infantry units swept across the frontiers, supported by dark swarms of Luftwaffe aircraft that blackened the morning skies. In Paris and London, the Allied High Command received the emergency cables with a strange mixture of relief and absolute confidence. To the veteran French and British generals, this was the exact scenario they had spent nearly a decade anticipating. They were entirely convinced that Adolf Hitler was merely repeating the old Schlieffen Plan from the First World War, blindly pushing his primary forces through the Low Countries in a desperate bid to bypass the French borders. Reacting with absolute textbook precision, the finest, most modern and heavily mechanized armies of France and the British Expeditionary Force immediately abandoned their defensive positions. They surged forward into Belgium, execution of the Grand Dial Plan, eager to meet the advancing German divisions head-on in an open field of battle. They did not know that they were voluntarily marching directly into the most sophisticated, lethal strategic trap in the history of human conflict. The chaotic assault in Belgium was a brilliant theatrical illusion, a massive, calculated piece of operational bait designed to draw the Allied strength north. Exactly 70 miles to the south, hidden inside the dense, treacherous, and completely fog-choked forests of the Ardennes, an invisible, monstrous iron fist was preparing to strike. While the Allied generals looked to the Belgian plains, General Heinz Guderian and his elite tank corps were quietly pushing through a mountain terrain that French military experts had officially declared to be completely impassable to armored vehicles. This was the birth of the Sichelschnitt, the Sickle Cut, a revolutionary, high-stakes operational masterpiece conceived by Erich von Manstein that would systematically bypass the legendary concrete fortifications of the Maginot Line. In a matter of mere days, this hidden mechanized dagger would strike the weak hinge of the Allied front at Sedan, carve through the defenseless French interior, and race toward the waters of the English Channel, threatening to completely sever, encircle, and annihilate the greatest armies of the democratic world in a single lightning campaign that would leave the civilized world frozen in absolute, paralyzed shock. To understand the psychological collapse of France in May 1940, one must first look at the monumental monument of concrete and steel that defined its military doctrine, the legendary Maginot Line. Conceived in the late 1920s by War Minister André Maginot, this defensive barrier was an absolute masterpiece of modern engineering. Spanning the entire length of the French-German border, it was not a mere series of separate trenches, but a fully integrated subterranean iron wall. Deep beneath the earth lay entire military cities. The Maginot Line featured reinforced concrete bunkers that could withstand direct hits from the heaviest artillery, subterranean diesel power plants, sophisticated air filtration systems to repel chemical attacks, and an extensive network of electric underground railways that could move thousands of soldiers and tons of ammunition to any threatened sector in a matter of minutes. Its heavy guns, housed in retractable armored steel turrets, could fire devastating barrages into Germany without ever exposing a single French soldier to enemy view. It was a technological marvel, but it carried a fatal, invisible flaw. It created a paralyzing fortress mentality within the French High Command. French generals, led by the aging conservative commander-in-chief Maurice Gamelin, became completely intoxicated by this illusion of absolute security. They genuinely believed that the age of maneuver warfare was dead, and that any future conflict would be a slow, static rerun of the First World War. This strategic stagnation became dangerously apparent during the historic period known as the Phoney War, or as the French called it, drôle de guerre. On September 3, 1939, following Hitler's brutal invasion of Poland, France and Great Britain officially declared war on Germany. At that exact moment, the German Western Front was a ghost town. Hitler had massed almost all his mechanized divisions, tanks, and aircraft in the east, leaving a skeleton crew of poorly trained infantry to hold the rudimentary Siegfried Line opposite France. If the French military had launched a massive, immediate offensive into Germany with its millions of mobilized soldiers, they could have easily marched deep into the Ruhr industrial heartland and ended the Second World War before it truly began. Instead, bound to their defensive dogmas, the French army did absolutely nothing. They stood completely stationary inside their concrete fortresses, watching the German border through binoculars, while Poland was systematically erased from the map. For 8 long months, a suffocating, unnatural quiet hung over the Western Front. Instead of utilizing this vital time for rigorous tactical training, realistic combat maneuvers, and modern tank integration, the French army was allowed to slowly and systematically rot from within. Millions of mobilized French soldiers, packed tightly into static camps and damp underground bunkers, faced an enemy far more insidious than the Wehrmacht: absolute grinding boredom. To maintain morale, the French government ordered millions of liters of wine to the front lines, sponsored professional football matches between regiments, and set up mobile cinemas. Discipline dissolved. Soldiers spent their days playing cards, drinking, and writing letters home, while communist and Nazi propaganda leaflets, dropped by German aircraft, whispered to the troops that they were being forced to wait and die for the sake of British imperial interests. By the spring of 1940, the French army was a colossal, heavily armed giant, but it was a giant that had lost its warrior spirit, its operational initiative, and its tactical focus, blindly waiting inside its concrete shell, while a highly aggressive, deeply analytical enemy was meticulously preparing its execution. To fully grasp the strategic brilliance that led to the fall of France, one must look closely at the intense, hidden civil war that took place inside the German General Staff during the winter of 1940. Originally, Adolf Hitler had ordered an immediate invasion of the West for late 1939. The initial operational plan drafted by the Supreme Command of the Army, or OKH, was remarkably uninspired. It was a literal, cautious imitation of the old 1914 Schlieffen Plan, directing the primary weight of the German panzer divisions directly through the flat plains of Belgium and the Netherlands. When copies of this initial plan were accidentally captured by the Belgian military after a German liaison aircraft crashed in January 1940, the Allied High Command felt a sense of supreme confirmation. They knew exactly where the German blow was coming, and they prepared their best, most modern mechanized divisions to move north into Belgium to block it. If Germany had executed that original plan, they would have run directly into the teeth of the combined Anglo-French elite forces, leading to a bloody, prolonged stalemate and a repeat of the horrific trench warfare of the First World War. The man who shattered this conventional thinking was a brilliant, fiercely independent operational mind, Lieutenant General Erich von Manstein. Manstein recognized that the OKH plan was a dangerous trap. He argued that the German military should not seek a mere frontal collision with the Allied strength. Instead, they needed to launch a decisive, asymmetric strike that would completely decouple the enemy's front from its logistics. Manstein conceived a revolutionary operational masterpiece that would be historically christened the Sichelschnitt, the Sickle Cut. His plan was as simple as it was breathtakingly dangerous. While a secondary German force under General Fedor von Bock would launch a highly visible, loud diversionary assault into Belgium and Holland to pull the Allied armies north, the true, massive center of gravity of the invasion would be concentrated further south, directly opposite the dense, hilly, and heavily forested Ardennes region of Luxembourg in Belgium. The Ardennes was a treacherous landscape defined by steep ravines, winding, narrow mountain paths, and thick primeval forests. For decades, French military experts, including the legendary hero of Verdun, Marshal Philippe Pétain, had officially declared the Ardennes to be completely impassable to modern mechanized armies. Relying on this dogmatic assumption, the French High Command left the Ardennes sector almost completely undefended, protecting it with only a few poorly equipped second-rate reserve infantry divisions, while using the mighty Maginot Line to secure the border further south. Manstein saw this undefended hinge as the perfect vulnerability. He proposed to pack the absolute elite of Germany's armored strength, 7 out of their 10 available panzer divisions, into a massive single mechanized battering ram. This iron spearhead would secretly slip through the narrow mountain passes of the Ardennes, cross the strategic Meuse River at Sedan before the French even realized what was happening, and then unleash a wild, unrestrained race westward toward the waters of the English Channel. By doing so, the German panzers would act like a giant razor-sharp sickle, cutting directly through the thin Allied rearguard and trapping the finest armies of France and Britain in a monstrous, inescapable pocket in Belgium. It was a colossal, high-stakes military gamble. If the tanks became stuck in the narrow forest roads, French aircraft could destroy the entire German offensive in a single afternoon. But Hitler, captivated by the sheer audacity of the maneuver, officially adopted Manstein's plan, setting the stage for a strategic shock that would rewrite the textbook of modern warfare forever. To ensure that the primary armored sickle cut through the Ardennes would not be checked by an Allied counteroffensive from the north, the German High Command had to solve a seemingly impossible tactical problem on the opening morning of the campaign. They had to neutralize Fort Eben-Emael. Situated on the Belgian-Dutch frontier, protecting vital concrete bridges over the Albert Canal, Eben-Emael was universally recognized as the most formidable, architecturally advanced, and completely impregnable fortress in the world. It was a massive subterranean military mountain of reinforced concrete and steel, garrisoned by over 1,200 elite Belgian soldiers. Its heavy, long-range artillery pieces, housed in impenetrable armored cupolas, dominated the entire region, capable of obliterating any advancing German tank column from miles away. A conventional frontal infantry assault against its concrete walls would have resulted in a total slaughter. The mastermind behind the destruction of this modern titan was Adolf Hitler himself, who authorized a radical, highly classified special operations coup. At exactly 4:30 a.m. on May 10, 1940, while the world was still asleep, 11 silent, unpowered DFS-230 transport gliders slipped through the pre-dawn mist across the Belgian border. Towed secretly by Junkers transport aircraft and released miles away in total radio silence, these gliders did not land in front of the fort. Instead, taking the Belgian garrison in absolute paralyzed surprise, they landed directly on the sprawling, grassy rooftop of Fort Eben-Emael itself. Step out of the wooden gliders came just 85 elite German paratroopers, the top-secret Storm Gruppe Granit, commanded by Lieutenant Rudolf Witzig. These men were armed not just with submachine guns, but with a revolutionary top-secret weapon that changed the nature of siege warfare forever: top-secret shaped charges. These massive 50-kilogram hollow cone explosives focused the blast into a single white-hot jet of plasma capable of burning directly through meters of solid steel and reinforced concrete in a matter of seconds. Moving with flawless, terrifying synchronization across the dark roof of the fortress, the German commando systematically disabled the fort's peripheral vision and heavy weaponry. They dropped the shaped charges directly onto the armored observation slits and welded the rotating steel gun turrets into place, sealing the artillery pieces inside. Within the opening 15 minutes of the assault, the legendary multi-million-dollar defensive shield of Belgium was effectively blinded, deafened, and completely castrated. Deep beneath the earth, inside the concrete labyrinth, the 1,200 Belgian garrison soldiers faced a surreal nightmare. They could hear the terrifying explosions racking the roofs of their bunkers, but because the German commandos had sealed the exit steel doors from the outside, the garrison was completely trapped inside their own fortress, unable to launch a counterattack. For nearly 24 hours, 85 German paratroopers held the roof of the world's greatest fort against an army until the advanced columns of the German ground forces arrived to relieve them. The fall of Eben-Emael sent an electric shockwave of panic through Paris and London. The outer northern gate of the Allied defense had not just been broken, it had been surgically bypassed from the sky, throwing the entire Belgian defense into chaotic retreat and ensuring that the Allied elite divisions would push even deeper into Belgium, completely unaware that the real monstrous iron hammer was already swinging behind their backs. While the Allied High Command was completely transfixed by the dramatic aerial seizure of Fort Eben-Emael and the chaotic fighting on the Belgian plains, the true decisive hammer blow of the German Wehrmacht was being delivered in absolute, suffocating silence through the mountain passes of the Ardennes. Under the command of General Gerd von Rundstedt, Panzer Group Kleist had massed an unimaginable concentration of mechanical power, over 1,200 tanks, 41,000 soft-skin vehicles, and nearly 250,000 infantry combat troops. This monstrous iron serpent was ordered to squeeze through just 4 narrow, winding, and unpaved mountain roads. By the second day of the invasion, the operational gamble behind Manstein's plan came dangerously close to total, catastrophic self-destruction. The narrow forest paths became completely choked. A massive, historic traffic jam developed, stretching back over 150 miles from the front lines all the way to the Rhine River. Thousands of German tanks, armored cars, and fuel trucks sat completely bumper to bumper, engines idling, trapped in narrow mountain ravines surrounded by steep, rocky cliffs. If the French Air Force had launched a coordinated, full-scale bombing assault against this stationary, helpless line of steel, the entire German invasion would have been decisively shattered in a single afternoon. But the French High Command was trapped in a state of absolute intellectual paralysis. French reconnaissance pilots, flying high above the Ardennes, repeatedly radioed back terrifying reports, explicitly stating that they had spotted massive, endless columns of German armor moving with headlights on through the mountain forests. When these emergency intelligence files landed on the desk of General Gamelin's headquarters, they were completely dismissed. Dogmatically convinced that tanks could not operate in mountainous terrain, French strategists concluded that these movements were merely secondary, diversionary infantry units. Instead of dispatching their heavy bomber wings to obliterate the traffic jam, the French command ordered their air force to continue focusing exclusively on the Belgian sector, voluntarily throwing away their greatest opportunity to save France. Unchallenged from the air, the German traffic jam rapidly untangled. Leading the iron spearhead was the godfather of modern armored doctrine himself, General Heinz Guderian. Operating with a frantic, relentless operational energy, Guderian ordered his panzer divisions to bypass all conventional infantry support, driving his men forward day and night without sleep. German tank crews, fueled by a heavy distribution of pervitin, a powerful military-issued methamphetamine stimulant, fought through hallucinations and bone-crushing exhaustion, covering over 70 miles of treacherous mountain terrain in less than 60 hours. By the evening of May 12, 1940, the impossible had been achieved. The dense forests of the Ardennes suddenly opened up, and the advanced elements of Guderian's 1st and 10th Panzer Divisions looked down upon the shimmering waters of the historic Meuse River. They had reached the strategic French border town of Sedan. The thin, poorly equipped French reserve divisions holding the riverbank looked across the water in absolute paralyzed horror. The concrete mountain wall they thought would protect them had failed to appear. Instead, the legendary steel monster of the Blitzkrieg was standing right at their doorstep, ready to rip the open heart out of the French Republic. On the morning of May 13, 1940, the historical crossroads of Sedan became the focal center of gravity for the entire European war. Heinz Guderian's panzer divisions were standing on the northern bank of the Meuse River, but they faced a daunting, dangerous tactical obstacle. The southern bank was heavily fortified by the French 55th Infantry Division. Armed with hundreds of machine gun nests and artillery batteries dug deep into the high ridges of Marfay, the French commanded a perfect, unhindered line of sight over the open water. According to classical French military doctrine, crossing a major river required weeks of careful preparation, systematic buildup, and a massive deployment of heavy infantry artillery to suppress the enemy dugouts. But Guderian did not have weeks. He had mere hours before the main French strategic reinforcements would arrive to seal the breach. To overcome this defense, Guderian executed a revolutionary, terrifying tactical alternative. He completely replaced slow traditional ground artillery with the devastating tactical power of the Luftwaffe. Beginning at exactly 8 a.m., General Wolfgang von Richthofen's 8th Air Corps launched a massive, continuous, and highly coordinated 8-hour aerial assault. Over 300 Junkers Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers, supported by wings of heavy Dornier bombers, turned the sky over Sedan into a screaming, chaotic firestorm. Operating in relentless, overlapping waves, the Stukas would tilt into vertical dives, dropping out of the clouds directly onto the French positions. As they fell, specialized mechanical sirens attached to the landing gear, the infamous Jericho trumpets, unleashed a piercing, high-pitched, and blood-curdling wail that shattered the physical and mental equilibrium of the men below. The physical destruction of the concrete bunkers was localized, but the psychological effect was absolute, crushing, and final. For 8 uninterrupted hours, the French reserve soldiers were trapped inside dark, shaking concrete boxes, unable to look up, unable to communicate, and suffocated by the thick black smoke and the unrelenting, deafening thunder of high explosive detonations. The constant, terrifying wail of the sirens tore through the nerves of the civilian reservists who made up the bulk of the defending divisions. By 4 p.m., while the air was still thick with dust and burning cordite, Guderian's elite combat engineers and assault infantry slipped into the water on small rubber inflatable boats. As they paddled across the Meuse under sporadic, uncoordinated defensive fire, they discovered a French defense that had been completely intellectually and emotionally hollowed out. Shocked, concussed, and thoroughly driven mad by the psychological trauma of the bombardment, entire French platoons abandoned their intact machine gun bunkers, raising their hands in total surrender. By nightfall, German engineers had constructed a massive pontoon bridge across the river, and the heavy tracks of the first Panzer III and IV tanks began rumbling onto the southern bank. Precisely at that moment, an unverified rumor of approaching German armor raced through the French rear lines. It triggered a sudden, catastrophic psychological phenomenon known as the Panic of Bolson. Thousands of French soldiers, throwing away their rifles, abandoning their heavy field guns, and screaming that they were being encircled, turned and fled in a chaotic, stampeding mass toward the south. The iron line of the Meuse was utterly broken. The gateway to the defenseless French interior was thrown wide open, and Guderian's panzers were now free to pivot west, beginning their wild, unchecked race toward the Atlantic coast. With the iron barrier of the Meuse River shattered at Sedan, the strategic landscape of Western Europe dissolved into absolute fluid chaos. Heinz Guderian, completely ignoring traditional military manuals and cutting off all direct communication with his own cautious superiors, unleashed his panzer divisions into the open, defenseless rear of the French Republic. This was the pure, unadulterated realization of the Blitzkrieg. German tank columns, moving in a tight, hyperextended spearhead, raced across the rolling French countryside, covering over 40 miles a day, completely bypassing pockets of Allied resistance and leaving the enemy command in a state of total intellectual blindness. A surreal, historic irony developed. The speed of the advance was so terrifying that it caused a massive wave of panic not only in Paris, but inside the dark headquarters of Adolf Hitler himself. The German dictator and his conservative high command generals, terrified that their tanks were advancing too fast and leaving their long southern flanks dangerously exposed to a French counterattack, repeatedly issued frantic, furious orders, commands to stop. But Guderian and his fellow commanders outmaneuvered their own high command. They cleverly disguised their continuous offensive movements as reconnaissance in force, keeping their boots heavy on the gas pedals and pushing their engines to the absolute breaking point. In Paris, the atmosphere was one of apocalyptic doom. On May 15th, just 5 days after the invasion began, Winston Churchill telephoned Premier Paul Reynaud to assess the situation. Reynaud's voice was breaking as he uttered 4 words that shook the British Prime Minister to his core. "We have been defeated." When Churchill flew to Paris the next day and looked out the windows of the Quai d'Orsay, he saw French government officials openly burning heaps of secret diplomatic archives in the gardens, while smoke hung over the capital. When Churchill asked General Gamelin, "Where is the strategic reserve?" Gamelin looked down in frozen silence and shook his head. There was no reserve. The finest, most modern divisions of France had been deployed far to the north, and there was nothing left to stand between Hitler's tanks and the Atlantic Ocean. On May 20th, 1940, the mechanized race reached its inevitable, catastrophic finish line. The advanced elements of the 2nd Panzer Division rolled into the coastal town of Abbeville, reaching the waters of the English Channel. The razor-sharp sickle had officially cut all the way through the continent. In just 10 short days, the German Wehrmacht had executed a strategic masterpiece of encirclement. The Iron Noose was closed. Over 350,000 of the absolute finest elite troops of the French First Army, alongside the entire British Expeditionary Force, were completely cut off from their supply lines, separated from the rest of France, and systematically pinned against the freezing waters of the sea around the small port of Dunkirk. The first act of the greatest military tragedy in Western European history was complete. And as the Allied soldiers looked back at the advancing ring of German armor, they realized that their only hope for biological survival lay in a miracle from the sea. Every single week, we bring you new, in-depth breakdowns of the most critical events, hidden strategies, and untold stories of the war. To make sure you never miss an episode, hit that subscribe button right now and turn on the notification bell. Your support is what keeps this project alive. If you found this story compelling, please leave a like and don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments section below. We read and reply to every single one. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned and we will see you in the next video.